Hello and welcome to this WION Live Broadcast from Washington, DC. I'm Kate Fisher, and in this bulletin we'll get you up on stories developing all around the world. First up, the headlines. China slams the US's invitation to Taiwan for a summit on democracy. Beijing reiterates its claim on Taiwan and says the island is an inalienable part of its territory. The UN atomic watchdog says negotiations held in Tehran this week over Iran's nuclear program proved inconclusive despite best efforts. The EU Health Agency calls on member states to urgently introduce anti-COVID measures as infections continue to spike across the continent. The EU calls for verifiable proof from China on Peng Shuai and urges China to carry out a full and transparent probe into the tennis star's accusations. As Angela Merkel chairs her last cabinet meeting, Germany moves closer to getting her successor, with Social Democrat Olaf Scholz announcing a three-way coalition after 2 months of talks. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed vows to head for the front lines as the Tigray rebels move closer to the capital, Addis Ababa. And a NASA mission to deliberately smash a spacecraft into an asteroid to see if its course can be altered blasts off from California. The United States has invited Taiwan to participate in a virtual summit on democracy, along with over 100 countries. It's a move that's left China infuriated. Slamming the Joe Biden administration, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said that it firmly opposes Washington's invitation to Taipei to participate in the so-called Summit for Democracy. Washington's invitation to Taiwan comes as China continues to step up pressure on countries to downgrade or sever relations with the island, which China views as its own territory. According to the US State Department, the summit is expected to focus on 3 principal themes: defending against authoritarianism, fighting corruption, and promoting respect for human rights. It aims to help stop the erosion of rights and freedoms worldwide. There are 110 participants on the invitation list for the virtual event, which will take place on the 9th and 10th of December. The mix of invitees includes liberal democracies, weaker democracies, and several states with authoritarian characteristics. The majority of invitees, 77 countries, rank as free or fully democratic, according to Freedom House's 2021 report. Another 31 invitees rank as partly free. 3 countries fall into the not free list. Israel and Iraq are the only 2 West Asian countries on the invite list. France, Sweden, the Philippines, India, Poland, Japan and South Korea are among the 110 invitees. Notably, China and Russia have not been invited. Neither has Thailand, Vietnam or US ally Egypt and NATO member Turkey. Afghanistan and Myanmar, which recently witnessed the toppling of democratic regimes, are also not on the list. Relations between Washington and Beijing have deteriorated in recent months, especially over Taiwan. China's significantly increased military activities near the self-ruled democratic island. It's been building pressure on Taiwan by sending a large number of ships, which it claims are fishing vessels, into the disputed South China Sea. It's also staged several air missions over the Taiwan Strait as a form of imposing military pressure on the island. The US has pledged military support to Taiwan, saying it will make sure that the island has the means to defend itself. Well, for years, China has been in the race to become the world's top superpower, but a looming demographic crisis is adding to the list of challenges that it faces. A rapidly ageing workforce, a slowing economy, and the weakest population growth in decades may slow down Beijing's run to the top. China's birth rate has plummeted to its lowest level since 1978. Data released by the country's National Bureau of Statistics shows there were 8.5 births per 1,000 people in 2020. For the first time in decades, the number has fallen below 10, and it's the lowest figure since Communist China was founded in 1949. Demographers contribute this sharp decline to falling numbers of women of childbearing age and the impact of COVID-19. In May, a once-in-a-decade census showed that China's population grew at its slowest rate since the 90s. The government's under immense pressure to prevent a potential population decline. China relaxed its one-child policy, one of the world's strictest family planning regulations, in 2016, allowing couples to have 2 children. Earlier this year, it was extended to 3 children. Local authorities have also been relaxing other limits, and they've been easing costs associated with education and child rearing. But changes in policies have failed to result in the expected baby boom. In addition, the number of marriages registered in 2020 reached a 17-year low. Only 8.14 million couples tied the knot last year. The number of divorces also fell for the first time in at least 30 years. China's statistical yearbook data highlights several social trends which are troubling its leadership. That's pushed a socially conservative agenda for women. Apple Inc. has filed a lawsuit against Israeli cyber firm NSO Group for alleged surveillance and targeting of US Apple users with its Pegasus spyware. The Silicon Valley giant also seeks to ban NSO Group from using any Apple software, services or devices to prevent further abuse. Apple's suit has added to the troubles faced by an embattled NSO, which has been accused of targeting and spying on human rights workers and journalists.
Apple is suing an Israeli cyber firm and its parent company for allegedly targeting its users with spyware. On Tuesday, the iPhone maker said it had filed a lawsuit against NSO Group and its parent company, OSY Technologies. The Israeli company's Pegasus software infects smartphones to enable the extraction of messages, photos and emails, record calls, and secretly activate microphones. It's allegedly been used to target journalists, human rights activists and politicians. In its complaint, Apple said NSO's tools have been used in 2021 to, quote, target and attack Apple customers, and that US citizens have been surveilled by NSO's spyware on mobile devices that can and do cross international borders. Apple alleged the NSO Group created more than 100 fake Apple ID user credentials to carry out its attacks. It said that its servers were not hacked, but the NSO misused and manipulated them to deliver the attacks on Apple users. Apple is seeking to also ban NSO Group from using any Apple software, services or devices. NSO has always said its software is intended to be used by governments and law enforcement against criminals and terrorists. In a statement, it added that thousands of lives have been saved through the use of its tools. Apple plans to donate $10 million, as well as any damages recovered in the lawsuit, to cyber surveillance research groups.
Shifting focus to Wisconsin, United States, where the man accused of driving his car into a Christmas parade has made his first court appearance. The suspect has been charged with 5 counts of homicide. though that could possibly rise after the death toll rose to 6. The latest victim, according to prosecutors, was an 8-year-old boy, the first child to have died in the incident. In addition to the 6 people killed, more than 60 were injured, many of them being children.
Mr. Brooks is facing 5 life sentences if he's convicted on all counts in this complaint. I wish to notify the court, sadly, that today we learned of another death of a child related to this case. We do expect a 6th count for first-degree intentional homicide to be issued or added, to this case.
Darrell Brooks appeared in Waukesha County Court, which set bail at a steep $5 million. Authorities said that Brooks deliberately drove an SUV through the police barricades on Sunday at the city's annual parade. The high bail amount comes after Brooks was released from custody in another case after posting a $1,000 cash bail, an amount which Milwaukee County District Attorney's Office has admitted was inappropriately low. Earlier in November, Brooks was charged with a slew of charges, including obstructing an officer, battery and jumping bail in a domestic abuse case. Shortly before Sunday's attack, police had received a domestic disturbance complaint involving Brooks.
So I do want to commend the audience.
We move to Canada now, and a week after the country coast was battered by historic flooding, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that he will help to rebuild British Columbia, while emphasising that now is the time to ramp up the fight against climate change. Trudeau made the comments while opening a new parliamentary session on Tuesday. He was re-elected earlier this September for his 3rd run as Canadian Prime Minister. Also in attendance at the session was Canada's Governor-General and Rep of the British Crown, Mary May Simon.
Growing an economy that works for everyone, fighting climate change, moving forward on a path of reconciliation, making sure our communities are safe, healthy and inclusive. Yes, the decade got off to an incredibly difficult start, but this is the time to rebuild. This is the moment for bolder climate action. Building a resilient economy means investing in people, but the work does not stop here. After all, growing the economy and protecting the environment go hand in hand.
Simon highlighted the problems people in her province face almost every day. British Columbia has witnessed the devastating effects of climate change twice this year. A few months ago, several wildfires brought life to a halt. It led to a heavy loss of property and livelihood. And as of last week, the western province was inundated for days due to heavy rainfall. Almost 18,000 people had to be evacuated and 4 lost their lives in the flooding. New Zealand will keep its borders closed to most international travellers for a further 5 months. The government has outlined a cautious easing of coronavirus border restrictions that have been in place for nearly 2 years. Fully vaccinated international travellers will be allowed to enter the country from April the 30th.
New Zealand announced plans on Wednesday to reopen its borders to foreign travellers from the end of April next year. The country has had tight border controls in place since COVID-19 hit in March 2020. Those restrictions will now slowly be eased. From January next year, fully vaccinated New Zealanders, residence visa holders in Australia, can travel to the country. New Zealanders from most other countries will be allowed in from February. Those arriving have to be fully vaccinated, but will no longer be required to stay in state quarantine facilities. Instead, other measures will be put in place, including self-isolation and a negative pre-departure test. COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins.
A phased approach to reconnecting with the world is the safest approach to ensure that risk is carefully managed as the potential impacts on vulnerable communities and on the New Zealand health system.
The government's tight border restrictions have helped New Zealand limit the spread of the disease, kept its death toll down and allowed the economy to recover faster than others. But an outbreak of the highly contagious Delta variant earlier this year forced the government to change track. The main focus has now been placed on vaccinating the population, with the city of Auckland gradually opening up as inoculation rates climb.
Well, here in the US, New York City was once the epicenter of America's COVID-19 crisis. A crippling lockdown brought the bustling city to a standstill. One Ghanaian man in New York decided to put his time to good use. He sifted through storage containers and bookshops, and now he's acquired the world's largest collection of African photography books. Our next report tells you more.
During months of lockdown, while some worked from home, others focused on projects. Some went on a personal fitness journey, others took up baking and other such hobbies. Everyone tried to achieve some form of normalcy in an otherwise unprecedented situation. And that's exactly what Paul Ninson did. When New York was locked down at the height of the pandemic in the United States, he scoured through the shelves of struggling bookshops and rusty storage containers. He has now built the world's largest collection of African photography books.
My way through photography was just looking at scenes and photography books. Some of these pictures are incredible. Some of these pictures tell stories of places, but mostly sometimes what I wonder is, what if those people in those communities contribute to these stories in a way of self-expression of who they are? Do people in these communities accept how they are being depicted, especially the Americans?
Ninson hails from Ghana, and he hopes to bring his prized collection back home soon and open a photography museum by organizing a crowdfunding campaign. The campaign has already raised more than $1 million in 2 days. The collection includes 30,000 magazines, stacks of all National Geographic issues dating back 40 years.
When there's a lot of people in Ghana who are desperately willing to be photographers to tell stories of Africa. So for me, it was like the sacrifice will pay off. And that was my reward, always.
Ninson will soon send his collection to Ghana's capital, where he plans to open Africa's largest photography library. He also talks of the brutal murder of a black man named George Floyd in the US by the police. It awakened him to a reality that he had long heard about from African Americans.
After George Floyd incident, I was very scared. I was like, oh, this is what they've been talking about, you know. And I was scared, you know, and also for some people to talk to you in a certain kind of way and to make you aware that you're black. And in my mind, I'm like, what do you mean I'm black? You know, I'm like, I'm an African. So it's like, it took me some time to accept that I'm black, because where I come from, we don't talk about race. We talk about people, human beings. We're very welcoming people. So that's something I really had to adjust to.
Ninson will return to Ghana in December, and a temporary facility will house his prize collection. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
An unknown bidder has got his or her hands on a rare scientific manuscript, which offers a glimpse into the mind of the genius and greatest physicist of all time, Albert Einstein. The document, which outlines calculations that led to Einstein's theory of relativity, which changed the course of modern science, was sold for $13 million.
A rare manuscript by Albert Einstein that changed the course of modern science was sold for $13 million on Tuesday. The 54-page document was handwritten between 1913 and 1914 in Zurich by Einstein and his colleague and confidant, Swiss engineer Michel Bessot. The manuscript was originally expected to fetch $3.5 million, but went for nearly 4 times the pre-sale estimate. It features early calculations that led to Einstein's general theory of relativity, building on his theory of special relativity from 1905, encapsulated in the famous equation E equals mc square. Christie's, which handled the sale, called the notes without a doubt the most valuable Einstein manuscript ever to come to auction.
It's a manuscript they worked on between 1913 and 1914. That's also what makes it particularly important, since working documents by Einstein before 1919 are extremely rare. Einstein is someone who kept very few notes, so the mere fact that the manuscript survived and made its way to us already makes it absolutely extraordinary.
Einstein's theory of relativity revolutionized his field by bringing in new ways of looking at the movement of objects in space and time. He also made major contributions to quantum mechanics and won the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1921. The year 2021 marks the centenary year of the Nobel Prize to the great physicist.
What I find particularly touching with reading this manuscript is that we can have this sort of monolithic and infallible image of Einstein as an absolute genius, who from the first calculation finds the right equation. But this manuscript shows that Einstein was intelligent, but he was a scientist just like any other. And like any other scientist, he goes through phases of doubt, of hypotheses that are confirmed or not, through verification, through errors.
The genius also became a pop culture icon thanks to his dry witticisms, his trademark unruly hair, mustache, and bushy eyebrows. Albert Einstein died in 1955, aged 76, and is recognized as one of the greatest theoretical physicists of all time. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Here in Washington, US President Joe Biden, First Lady Jill Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris and Second Gentleman Douglas Emhoff have been helping at a local kitchen preparing food for the needy. They prepared Thanksgiving meals for people who can't afford it. We'll leave you with these vigils. And from the US, a very happy Thanksgiving. I'm thankful to you for watching. We'll have more global news and updates on WION World is One.
Many other. This is Arab.